Okay. I think we can get ahead with the questions. Um, Thank you so much, Ahmed and Angelus. I feel we have b- because Abdullah's presentation was supposed also to provide a kind of also a hint in the timeline. Um, but the two presentations kind of located crisis or catastrophe in two different timelines. And quite interestingly, in your case, Angelus, it's catastrophe is present and the materiality of it. And in Ahmed's case, catastrophe is in the absence of that materiality that no longer mediates. And we don't even have that privilege of distance or time from catastrophe where we can also contemplate on kind of on its materiality. Um, so I feel like that was quite an interesting contrast between the two. Angelus, my question for you is, have you, in your presentation, it's very much located in the mountain and it's a spectacle. And as you were presenting, I was thinking of it as marble, as a representation of how that story of empire also kind of fractured into all of those story of privilege elsewhere, right? So it's like I'm pretty sure in Ahmed's house is the same, or my house, where marble is used in kind of saloons where you host guests, and it's like it's the fancier room, and some families can afford marble, other families would not, and it kind of creates a whole kind of social class. So have you tracked in your research the travel of this marble, where it goes, and what kind of and that relationship to the empire in the absence of the mountain, for instance?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's true, like this is the way that how my PhD journey started about criticizing the use of marble as well in these high-end projects in like or in the higher social strata houses. But during my research, I discovered that marble was also used had everyday use in like small parts like window sills or like door frames, mostly as discarded material or reused from other purposes. So it seems like the history is a little bit more nuanced. It's not only there in the high-end projects, but it seems like these alternative histories of marble being used in from other social classes being marginalized or becoming invisible in the way of narrating this material. So yes, definitely it has been used in these big cultural institutions, and was part of the general narrative of the Greek nation state after the 19th century, where not only Greece but also Europe used it in order to legitimize their notions of civilizations and so on and so forth. So that what I'm trying to do and what I would like to do in the future is like how to use, like as I said, like the problem is not in the material, it's like how the material has been manipulating through the years in order to express this high status. So what I would like to do is like try to work more to try to trace first the material use that has been used from other marginalized people and other uses, but also in the what's the conditions with the nature, and then find a way to work with like discarded marble or similar uses that they are very much apparent in the mountain right now. They are like uh, big piles of discarded marble that is not used, for example. That is from like it's like a continuous genealogy of just destruction and discardment of the marble, I would say, from the 90s, 60s. 60s. 60s.
Mm. 60s. 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 60 Thank you, Angeles. Uh, I think the two of you are taking this very disruptive position as well of, for instance, what you said, Ahmad, this transition as well into academia and bringing what you know about artists and thinking about it in um, from a different voice. So you've been in practice, you've been in field, and now by this transition, there's a whole kind of recognition um, um, of memory of what it means also to be in exile, or exile, like to be in Gaza and to be in exile, to be outside and to be in exile. And I feel like it might be interesting if you could reflect a little bit on this transition in your role and how disruptive it is. So now you are in France, you're based in France, and you are affiliated to a different kind of institution to what you used to be affiliated to. So maybe a reflection on this shift in the voice and how that built a new memory ممكن. I don't know if you have any reflection on this kind of shift in voice, because now you're using more theory in order to speak. Um, yeah, and how that shift in voice enables maybe a new reconstruction or a more solid grounds for this reconstruction of memory.
Thank you, Aya. Yeah, actually, it's very challenging. It's
Mm.
never easy. Because I think it's in a way or another it's imposed.
Mm.
What I try to do, uh, first of all, it wasn't my first option or it wasn't my option. Like if I think of my life 2 years or 3 years ago, I had this stable, very stable career and very stable line of doing uh, cultural activities in Gaza, reading Palestinian NGO who supports libraries, who do exhibitions and poetry evening, music festivals inside Gaza Strip, and I always have thought about it as my dream job because actually work doing cultural activities inside Gaza is something very interesting because the people are very thirsty to culture. The level of reading, for example, in Gaza, the people who were like enrolled and joining the public libraries was something in comparison to other places. I don't want to name some places, but in comparison to even when I'm here in France, I keep doing this comparison in my head. Like libraries in Gaza was never empty. Libraries in Gaza were never only because here when I go to a library in Paris in Tours where I live, people they go to the library to borrow some books and to leave. In Gaza, libraries were like emancipation place where it collected all writers, artists. It was their space. It was their space to meet, to create, and to run from censorship, to run from occupation. So libraries were like the place where everyone were like meeting inside Gaza Strip. It was very alive place. So I thought like this is what I gonna do my whole life. Now, after this dramatic change that happened only to me, but to every Gazan, to everyone in Palestine, in Gaza Strip in particular, after the genocide, I feel like we all changed our career. Not only our career, our life has changed dramatically because we no longer have our stable life as before. We do imagine being homeless. Homeless, when you hear this word, you think about the people who are sleeping in the streets in London or in Paris or everywhere. But suddenly you have 2 million people who were deprived their right to live. Suddenly you have to live with the reality that 20,000 children were killed in front of your eyes, and you have to live with the reality that you lived for 2 years praying for the ceiling of your shelter, your house, not to fall on your children. So this very unfair experience that we lived has to be reflected on papers, has to be reflected on researches, has to be should go through history, and to keep it alive in history, to keep this storytelling, we have to write it. We have to talk about it, but also we have to write it. So what I'm trying to do also is to find my entry point, because okay, I have 1,000 story of my work in Gaza Strip. I have 1 million story and incidents that I lived and survived during the genocide. But also to speak to new audience, you have sometimes to find new entry points. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I found that wow, I'm very interested in literature and philosophy. I'm always in this cross point between the two. Uh, and I found the philosophy of post-war should be and could be an entry point, or at least could be something interesting to study and to do some reflections afterwards, uh, based on this experience, because someone has lived not similar experience. I think in the recent history, Gaza was like the darkest moment of history. But also, what Europe has lived during the World War II was never easy. What people in Armenia lived before 100 years was also something interesting to study. What happened in Bosnia, what happened in Rwanda, what is happening in Palestine for the last 70 years should be reflected in research, in literature, and also on art, because I need also researchers to see how at least there are 70 artists who left Gaza during the war by some mediators like the French, the Italians, I don't know, but they live in Europe. The first thing they have done, the first thing they thought about was not to build a new life, but the first thing they did is to do exhibitions, is to work, is to start reflecting about what they have lived, is to transmitting this message of their people. So there is a new movement is now being formed in Europe. Maybe some of them also in South Africa. I don't know where exactly in the world, but what I'm following right now is something also need to be questions. How those people who lost almost everything, who lost their family, or they are exiled now and disconnected from the other members of their family, and the first thing they do is to draw, to exhibit, to work, to sing. I have like some musicians from Gaza who live now in France. The second day of their arrival, they started talking about what happened, and I find that testimony and the storytelling is our way to heal, our way to continue, our way to connect our past to the present, and hoping that we can build a future somewhere in this world, but without roots. I don't know. Sorry if I talked a lot. You can stop me, Aya, whenever you.
It's just
you
like it's so interesting what you're saying. Thank you so much, Ahmed. But I want to open it up for our audience. So I know George has a question, and then we can go. So Emma, let's have George first, and we can have you. Okay?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Um, really interesting presentations. I enjoyed them. Uh, as much as I could hear, because I'm also working and I had to kind of be in and out for some moments, so maybe I lost something. Um, I have a question for Angelos, who presented this kind of very rich overview of Pandelic marble. And my question was about the enslaved workers and the precarity, like the precarious kind of working conditions you mentioned. So I understand this is part of a bigger research project, I assume. And the question is, these kind of spectral bodies almost that are part of the construction of the marbles. What is in the research? How do you kind of get this kind of information from, like, this sort of research, and how do you trace it? And are there kind of moments where you can also trace let's say, the the actual traces of the marble from the kind of these laborers are becoming evident? So there's like almost like, in a way, they have their own kind of different traces that you can capture. And in a way, even though, the actual marble has this kind of, what you said, like, it has like this idyllic kind of formal kind of element to it, are there moments where you can actually go back and trace kind of, let's say, the hand of a different kind of worker, accidents? But I'm very interested in let's say, these precarious workers, what you can know from them, where they might be kind of coming from, because I think it's very different. We saw another presentation last week, which was looking at the post-Turkey, the earthquakes. But that's a different types of precarious labor. I mean, here you're looking at kind of past historical instances. So here it's really a question of what's the access? What can you access in terms of research when it comes to these bodies, and to what extent they are kind of documented, recorded, and so on? Thank you.
Thanks, George. So yeah, my research is focusing mostly in from the 19th century in the creation and establishment of the modern Greek nation state and later, and always drawing parallels or trying to connect it also with ancient Greece and the classical heritage of Greece. There are some historical accounts and archaeological accounts that they have documented quite well the modern quarries of Mount Pentelicus. Of course, the marginalized labor is invisible in these accounts. However, I could find material through newspapers or archives, or even through oral histories from the relatives of people working there. What I found is that people working there were migrants from the Greek islands, from Cycladerna or from Carpathos in the Dodecanese, that they moved there so that they were like cheap labor at that time, and they were living in shelters in the mountain. And then it was like a lot of entangled histories that is connected with sanatoriums in Mount Pentelicus, etc. So at the same time, I don't delve into too much. I don't do a historiographical research. I am more focusing in the genealogical investigation of these materials. So I draw parallels with the enslaved workers, and I don't focus so much in the materialization of the marble monuments. but more on the materialization of this national identity of Greece, and also that was part of the general colonial identity of Europe. So how marble, even though, for example, it, like you said, was extracted from enslaved workers, how this part of the history is marginalized in order to create this Greece as the cradle of civilization, which I find very, very interesting, and how marble is also stabilized in order to produce these very specific meanings while not um, being unable to express some others. So the this is what I find so interesting. So I did some interviews with relatives from workers from the 70s during my research. I found quite much also from the newspapers. It was quite a lot of material regarding their work conditions, the toxicity of marble, how it was inhaled in their lungs, how it was quite interesting. I don't know if I reflected on all of your questions and notes.
Yes, I mean, there's so much to talk about because it's also the colonial apparatus, but thank you. I think this covers it, yeah.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Agnes. Emma, you have a question?
Yes, so I had a question for Ahmed. I wanted to know, and maybe this will be a follow-up to the point that were brought by Dr. Aya, and maybe on the discussion about infidelities that was brought in discussion. I wanted to know a bit more about, so because you're talking about how engaging with this resources allows you also to engage with a new public in a way. And so what I wanted to ask is also, how do you reflect maybe on the failures of this Western thought in a way in its context, so which is post World War II, which also carries a it's an era. For example, if we take Camus that you cited, we can think of what he said about so the Algerian independence, saying I believe in justice, but I would defend my mother. So saying that he would put because his mom was like a French in Algeria, saying that he would defend this. Yeah, so I mean, what I want to say is that it's also thoughts that come with idealization, maybe of a lot of things. And so, what I wanted to ask is how you, in your own positionality, you reflect critically on what it means for you as an individual to engage with these authors and with their limits. If you consider that these limits are relevant, and how it shapes your work now that you're in this context of France, which is also politically relevant, maybe to mention, as you coming from Gaza and working now. So yeah, how do you feel this failure? How do you reflect on this conflicts in your positionality and in the works you engage with in the context? Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Very interesting question, because actually I was like thinking all the time of this point in particular, but I always start with Mahmoud Darwish, Edward Said. I'm very, very much connected, and I was raised with those people, with those poets. So I start always by, even because part of my research right now and some lectures that I'm giving is related to censorship in literature in particular, and how it worked. So I always start by Palestinian citations and resources. And for Albert Camus, and what I started to deal with this point inside me, that I started to, because actually I'm part of my work. I'm here that the universities are built in laboratories. So the laboratory where I work, it's called Antro, is exactly between literature and philosophy. So the two faculties together. So I have to pass through what my colleagues in the office are talking about. So I find something interesting, I take it. And to deal with this point inside me, I started to look for their positions of the Palestinian cause, because for me it's a question of morality. It's a question of, it's like the base thing of, for anyone, for me to build a relation, even if it's intellectual relation, if it's a reading relation, to find how he used his philosophy, his thinking during his life, how he was like reflecting of what he learned. Because for me, philosophy and ethics, the very evident story is Palestine and Gaza. So like I was questioning even myself. Okay, this one, what was his position? So I found someone called Gilles Deleuze. Like, I don't know if you know more about Deleuze. So I heard his position from what happened in Palestine, and for me it was like the entry point, because after that I read almost all of his work. Because if you don't use your philosophy, your thinking, your books you read, uh, uh, dealing in such the Palestinian cause in particular, then it's useless. So for Albert Camus, one more minute, Aya, actually, as Algerian who was raised in Algeria in what we call like social neighborhood, a very very poor neighborhood, with his mother, the one you mentioned. Maybe he was like related to her, because she was died when he was very very young. She did when he was 4, I think, 5, something like that. Then he was engaged with the Algerians during the colonization of France inside Algeria. Then, when he moved to France, he also was like engaged against the Nazis regimes during World War II. And you know what captured my attention the most? The absurdity of even his life. He was dead, he was killed in a car accident when he was like 47 only. So I feel like the career, the path of this guy is something interesting, and I find his books interesting as well. So so that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be very cautious. It's very tricky, I know, but trying to solve it first and most by their position of what is happening and what happened in Palestine. If they're like did like Camus or Deleuze.
Can
Yeah,
I
I
add just
of,
a quick
of
thing? But still, I mean, Camille's mother she wasn't Algerian. Technically, she was Spanish.
uh,
But
Spanish.
yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, I love Camus as an author. I read all his work also, so I'm not. I'm just trying to maybe
Mm,
pull some threads, and but I just also reflect on Camus because I think is interesting in the French context, as you said, coming from a social background, and how he also serves maybe sometimes an agenda that is an agenda on meritocracy. You know, you often hear the story of Camus being like this through school and this story of emancipation. And so, yeah, I just think still we have to be critical because also, I mean, I think it's very interesting to take a French resistance, like the French resistance against the Nazis in this context, because I think it's yeah, they all, even when we say Jean-Paul Sartre and all these authors represent this also conflicted positions on resistance inside Europe, but also their positions on yeah, and definitely Deleuze is yeah very
yeah,
good. Yeah, so thank you so
yeah,
much for your answer. It was
yeah.
very
The last sentence on this actually. What I also like about him, about Camus, I actually I'm studying him more than I'm having like a final position right for the moment. But he's not recognized here in the philosophical faculties. He don't look at him as for his career, for his path, as a classical philosopher.
Yeah,
For
his philosophy is a bit. People say he's a bad philosopher, indeed.
yeah, exactly. So he's not well considered here. They think that he's not the philosopher that was raised and born in our system. He took another path, another career, and that's exactly what interests me also. That you shouldn't be very. I never had this stable line, you know. So I like people who do like this and this. So and at the end, he they don't think he's a good one, but he at least uh, he won Nobel for one of
Thank you
his
so
books.
much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for this point. It's very interesting one.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. We have still 2 minutes till we conclude, and I have a comment for Angelus. I think Angelus, when I read first your abstract at the beginning, I thought that were I thought like um, I thought like it was working across multiple scales, and I was slightly confused. But I feel like what you presented today was quite interesting. And the way you combined also the framework in order to problematize or to practice a form of infidelity to the spectacle of it, I think that was very powerful. So I really found that quite interesting, and I feel like this is really an invitation for the like when we say that the aesthetic no longer works, and I feel like this is a work that we really need to be doing as well on terms of disruption, the work of disruption that we usually, because I feel like in all the times when we look at those marble statues, the only thing is we have in mind is to appreciate and to wonder. But a little bit, do we also criticize or think about all the labor toxicity of materiality, like that it's transitioned? So associating those meanings and kind of being an infidel in that sense, and it's not only disruptive, but also it's a work of vandalizing this kind of imagery that we have about conventions around. I think that was really appreciated. So I don't know if you have any comment on that before the break.
Thank you very much for your comment. Yeah, I tried to narrow it down because like the first my first work like in the object surface particles like part of the general PhD research. So yeah, I like what I found out during my research is like there's more nuanced histories of the materials. By saying marble, it's not only the marble that we see in the museum, and it's also like what is the labor that constructed it, but also that marble, like that we shouldn't demonize somehow the materials, like the marble that is used in the very luxurious projects or like high cultural institutions can also be used as a recycled material in low-tech techniques, like for like in the like I researched like for the shelters of the quarry workers, it was used like recycled marble from the quarry. So yeah, um, that's my only
I have
insight, like to try to destabilize this notion and this cultural message that exists, that it's not only this, it's
Yeah.
also like other things that are also marginalized and invisible.
Awesome. Probably I have more questions that I might share with you later, but thank you so much, Angelus, and thank you so much, Ahmad, for all this elaboration and sharing. I feel like, yeah, working with Palestinian question at the moment is a very tough one as we navigate through philosophy and Like whom do we trust and whom do we no longer trust as people that we have inherited their writings and texts? I feel like it's a very good question. Thank you so much, both of you, and thanks for everyone that attended. It's not a goodbye, it's just like a 15-minute break for you to go get your coffee and join for the next session.